When you're watching the news, whether it's a local newscast or a national newscast, and you're tuning into ABC, NBC, or CBS, and you're looking at these reporters, you might actually think that you're looking at a full-time reporter. It's not always the case. You're often looking at people who are being paid a day rate for their job, and it is not a significant day rate. There's a class action lawsuit, class action labor law and sexual discrimination and age discrimination lawsuit that is happening right now against CBS Broadcasting Corporation. They will go to trial this week. My next guest filed the lawsuit. Silva Harapetian, she filed this lawsuit, folks, because she worked as a freelance reporter and producer for the CBS owned and operated station in Miami. When she complained about her pay, the work culture, discrimination, harassment, and safety, she said they stopped hiring her. They stopped giving her work. This has been a long battle, and it involves some serious allegations against CBS Broadcasting. Silva joins us right now. Silva, glad to have you here. So for people who don't quite understand our business, again, they think, oh, I'm watching Silva. I'm seeing her every day on this station in Miami. It's CBS. She's hit the big time. Not everybody that they're seeing is actually a full-time worker.
Yes, and that is partially the problem because freelance workers are being hired in place of full-time employees. And the reason that's a lucrative thing to do for CBS and or any other corporation is because freelancers are paid at a day rate, and they are paid significantly less than their counterparts who are full-time. Not to mention the fact that CBS, who hired freelancers, including me, also did not give us any of the benefits that come with working as a full-time employee. That means there's no overtime. That means there is no paid days off. That means there is no health coverage. That means that if I'm sick and I can't work, that means I'm not getting paid. So in addition to paying freelancers a fraction of what full-time employees are paid, we also don't get the benefits. We do the exact same job. We show up exactly the same way. We are scheduled exactly the same way. In fact, freelancers were actually in CBS forced to request time off, right? Which means we were also forced to work holidays because full-time employees wanted those days off. And we cover breaking news and risk our lives exactly the same way. But we are paid significantly differently. And in this particular case, it's about unpaid wages. When we work, we expect to be paid. And when we work hours and we are not paid for those hours, that is called wage theft. And we don't hear about wage theft very often because we associate wage theft with, day laborers and undocumented workers and immigrants. But wage theft actually takes on many forms. It can either be someone not getting paid overtime. It could be someone not being paid for their benefits. It could be an employee being misclassified as an independent contractor. It can be someone being paid less than a minimum wage. All of these things that add up to an employer not compensating an employee. And did you know, Roland, that according to the Economic Policy Institute, $50 billion, that's billion with a B, is stolen from American workers every single year. This kind of pay practice is responsible for homelessness. It is responsible for families not being able to put food on the table. It is responsible for people not being able to afford necessities. I was one of those people. I am in people's living rooms every day talking about how to stay safe in times of hurricane, how to get the latest information when there's breaking news. But I couldn't afford a car. I had to ride my scooter to work. And here's the thing. I am one face and I am one voice. But I represent hundreds of people, current and former employees, who have told me in private and in confidence that this is something that they have experienced. Many are traumatized and afraid and terrorized about coming forward. These are reporters and producers, people work in newsrooms across the country who are experiencing the exact same thing. This is a systemic issue that these corporations have mastered in keeping us in check and in quiet. And the irony of all of this is that I was hired as a journalist to ask questions. I was hired as a journalist to hold other businesses and other people accountable when they skirted the law or broke the law. I was hired to be the voice for people who are suffering from injustice. Yet somehow I lost opportunity. I have not worked since I filed this claim for 4 years.
So you have not worked for 4 years.
Yeah.
How long were you a freelancer? Because typically for a lot of places, if somebody works as a freelancer and they show, they do some good work, typically a company says, we're going to bring you on full time.
Yeah.
How long were you a freelancer?
7 years off and on. There are people who are
7 years.
7 years. There are people who are currently working in places like Los Angeles, in Miami, in New York, in Sacramento, in Philadelphia, who have been in freelance positions for years. Freelance is supposed to be temporary, but when you were able to save that kind of money, right? You keep the labor costs low and you keep stock prices high and people are able to collect their dividends. Very few people ask questions about the people who are actually doing the job. And everyone is
you are asserting that CBS Corporation is using a massive system to only employ a large number of freelancers to undercut having to pay them real wages, and this contributes to the bottom line of CBS. And just so everybody can understand, that CBS, of course, is owned by Viacom, so it's Viacom CBS. And when you talk about when all these people talk about, Viacom CBS is one of the small companies, that's how people try to refer to them. But we're talking about a company, stock price, Paramount's global class B stock on NASDAQ closed at $31.20. It is up. But we're talking about a company that's worth billions.
Right. And I myself have been fighting a multi-billion-dollar media conglomerate. It has been a David versus Goliath kind of fight. And we are going to court on Thursday because most of these cases, the law also is not written for the worker. It is written for the employer. A lot of cases are either thrown out or cases are settled in behind closed doors with employees forced to sign confidentiality and non-disparagement agreements. And when that happens, the employer gets to also include in that document that they deny all claims. I think it's about time that a jury of my peers is able to see the facts for what they are and is able to say what is really happening. When you take the law and conveniently interpret it in a way that allows you to steal from your workers, which is what happened to me, and refuse to pay overtime and hours that we worked, that somebody has to be held accountable. And something needs to change. I actually like your guest earlier who said, if you don't like the law, change it. Perhaps it's time we change things. We looked at these labor laws and asked questions. When is enough enough? This is not just a problem within an organization. It's also a problem within the industry. And it's also a systemic problem within the law that essentially does not work for the employee.
I'm going to ask you this question before I take it over to allow my panel to ask questions. You said you haven't worked in 4 years. I'm sure you've had friends and family and former co-workers, maybe even lawyers say, Silva, look, settle this. Just take whatever they give you and just move on with your life. Why have you been so insistent on wanting this to move forward and go to trial?
Roland, I remember growing up in Iran, and I remember witnessing the Iranian Revolution. And I remember hearing stories of journalists being kidnapped and journalists being jailed and journalists being beheaded. And I remember watching the news with my family, and I remember seeing men mutilate bodies of female mannequins and sawing off their heads. And I remember seeing images of disfigured women who had had acid thrown on their bodies. And these were images that were used to keep people within that patriarchal, oppressed society in check. My mother told me that those images were used to show what would happen if you didn't follow the rules. That's the society I come from. In this country, I've had an opportunity to be a journalist. I've had an opportunity to tell the truth. I take the work and what it's about in freedom of speech very seriously, because I have experienced in my life what happens when those things are compromised. And here we are. As a journalist, I am hired to tell the truth. I am hired to ask questions. I am hired to do the work. Yet somehow the truth in this case is conditional. I have not wanted anything other than to get back to work. I wanted to clear my name. I wanted them to hold themselves accountable and acknowledge what's been done. We haven't talked about the people that were fired for putting these types of systems and pay practices in check and at work within CBS. CBS itself fired those people and multiple executives because of allegations of pay practices and discrimination. What about the people like me, hundreds of us, whose careers were stunted, whose lives were ruined, whose dreams were completely shattered because of those pay practices? What about us? What happens to us? Where is the accountability? Where is the acknowledgement? We have been impacted severely. And while I am the only one who is speaking out because I have a vested interest, I have a different perspective about what it means to tell the truth, about what it means to have the opportunity to have freedom of speech. But there is daily that I receive calls from people who call and privately cry on my shoulders about how this has impacted them. And while legally there may be nothing that they may receive, but an acknowledgement and telling the truth and doing the right thing is going to mean everything to everyone. So yeah, I could take the money, but I'm not willing to sign on a dotted line that says they get to deny all of the charges. Because they have said in documents, their executives have said, we have hired freelance workers at all of our 28 owned and operated stations for decades. And we have paid them a flat rate that is based on an 8-hour workday. I don't know about you, Roland, but I have never worked an 8-hour as in the news department, in a newsroom. And we did so because it was administratively more convenient. That's been admitted already.
Indeed. Let's go to a question from a panel. Julianne Malveaux. Julianne, your question.
Sister, I have to tell you, you are my shero. I'm a labor economist by background, and when some of the words you're using are words that are not often used in the same sentence with a professional people, like wage theft. You usually think of someone with wage theft that they're working on an assembly line, or that they're at one of the big box stores or something like that. You don't think of it as professional people who've been highly trained, who have degrees, who have put their time in. So the word wage theft need to be used a lot more. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing that up. The second thing that's really important about what you said is about confidential settlements. Because see, if there's no record, then there's no precedent. if people sign an agreement saying, I'm going to give you 6 figures, just go away, and but you can't tell anybody, then there's a pattern and practice of discrimination, but you can't document it. And this happens far too often in corporate America. There are, piles and piles of people who they took, I won't say the easy way out, because many of them, like you haven't worked in 4 years. Many have not worked in several years. And they get down to, I don't know your circumstances, but they get down to their kids need tuition, their spouse is about to leave them, and they're like, let me take the money and run. So you have enormous determination here. But what, Trey, I know you talked about I shuddered when you talked about the beheading, et cetera, in the Iranian case, but it has to be something more than that. What is that inside you that once makes you want to fight? You're like ant fighting the elephant. An ant might win, but why, Ant, are you so determined? Because your determination shines through you. And I'm really proud of you. I don't know you, but I'm proud of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And we know the legal system doesn't always function that way. And I have been willing and open to consider other creative methods of settling this case, because essentially what I really want is to have my career back, to have my life back. I didn't do anything wrong. I showed up every day and I worked and I did a really great job. In fact, if I didn't do a great job, why did they hold on to me for 7 years? And, the other thing is what's taken for me to get to this point in my career is very different than anyone else. I came to this country when I was 12 years old. I did not speak a word of English. I've had to teach myself English as a high school sophomore, and then have had to figure out the system of how I would be able to go to college. I went to college using dictionaries and wrote papers with tutors, and it has been an incredibly difficult road for me to climb the ladder. And I have done every job in a newsroom. I have worked in small markets. I have moved all over the country. The level of personal sacrifice that I have made is beyond what anyone who is from this country and has grown up in this country is about. And also, as I'm talking about this, I'm also thinking about my parents. My parents sacrificed everything and escaped the country during war to give us an opportunity for a better life. And I took that very seriously. And I took it as my responsibility to do the right thing and to be the voice that my peers and my cousins and other people I knew back home could not be. And who would I be as a journalist if I didn't speak out? Who would I be as a journalist if I didn't stand up? And who would I be as a person if I didn't honor the sacrifice that my parents have made? They left everything behind. We left the country with what we could carry and started all over again. This is about me following the steps necessary to have the American dream, and then finally feeling like I had arrived, and then having it all ripped away because somehow that is conditional depending on what you say and how you say it and who you say it to. That wasn't the American I presented.
Omokongo, your question. Omokongo, your question.
Yes, this is deep. As a professor, I have conversations with professors across the country about issues relating to different, tenured professors versus assistant professors versus adjuncts versus professorial lecturers, and how there's like a discrepancy there. But at least in those cases across the country, the professors at least have some benefits, like employee benefits, even if it's like 9 months worth of benefits. You're talking about not even having that in your situation, and you and your colleagues. The question I have for you is that since we can't obviously join the lawsuits, and then you also said you have a lot of journalists out there who are scared of speaking up for fear of any type of reprisals, not getting hired or maybe getting fired, what can we do to support you all? Are there GoFundMe campaigns? Are there campaigns that pressure we can put on networks who are found to do these types of things? Because I can't think that there are people out there who are watching you all every day who will find out about this story and not want to do something to support you all because we watch for y'all, not the ownership. What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, and Roland can break this down better than I can, but the reality is the public can speak up, because essentially the work we do determines the rate of the advertising minutes, right, that are sold within their programming. And then advertisers are buying the time to then entice the viewer to buy the product. But I wonder if these advertisers know how the employees are being treated. And if they did, what would they do about it? Especially when you look at some of the things that we've discovered during the course of this case, which is, we've discovered that freelancers that were hired in place of full-time employees were mostly minorities, were women, people of color, and members of the LGBTQ community. They were disproportionately paid less and had fewer opportunities than anyone else. So when I continue to ask for a full-time job, by the way, I was paid $210 a day. I continued to be asked to be made full-time, and I was told by a female news director that the job isn't available to you. It now makes sense what that meant. So I think it's time that we publicly spoke out about the way people are paid, the way people are treated, about accountability, and thank you for the GoFundMe page. I mean, I suspect I will have significant attorney's fees, but the reality of the matter is that something needs to change within the law as well, because the law is skewed to protect the employer, not the employee. They have dismantled claims in my case using statute of limitation and legal jargon, which I don't really understand. And they've surgically taken apart specific parts of my case because of all of these hindrances and parameters that are in the law that do not benefit the worker in any kind of way.
Jeff?
Yes, first and foremost, Silva, thanks again for your struggle. I want to assure you on behalf of everybody watching that your struggle is not going to be in vain. You've been through too much, and as Steve Jobs said, we can't connect the dots going forward. We can only connect the dots going backward. I'm going to pause. I don't know if Roland will get mad at me for saying this right now, but if you're watching this right now, you should hit the like button. You should share this because this is a very real conversation. And I'm going to be really transparent right here. Last 30 years of my life, I primarily made my living as a 1099 employee. That means I'm a freelancer. That means that if I don't create, if I don't conceive of things, if I don't go out there every single day and find a way to make it happen, I just don't eat. So I'm uniquely sensitive to people who are hired to be day wage workers. People may look at you and they say, oh, Silva, she's got it going on. She's articulate. She's on television. She's got everything going. $210 a day. Let me give you all some perspective before I ask Silva your question. $210 a day sounds like a lot if you're making $15 an hour. But when you're a freelance employee, commercials that you see people shooting where people are loading trucks and putting up harnesses and doing grip work. When you see the movies and they say this is a grip job, that grip job, you can get a grip job at $375 a day. And you're not doing the investigative work that an employer is putting on. You're just carrying stuff from point A to point B. CBS is a major international corporation. They've settled lawsuits for millions of dollars. Their stock price is healthy. When you talk about CBS, you're talking about Viacom. You're talking about MTV. You're talking about Showtime. You're talking about major networks. Silva, you're going to win this struggle, but I want you to give people an understanding who may say very rude things to you of what life is like for you now by answering this one question. What do you say to people who say, well, you're on TV, so you should be satisfied with just getting good exposure there?
Well, I will say that that is exactly what we've been conditioned to believe within the industry, to then accept the realities of working for free, right? We have been told that you go to a small market and you do extra work and you go above and beyond to hone your craft. And this is what you must do in order to climb the ladder, which is fine. I did that willingly. I worked, 10 hours a day when I worked in Oklahoma and Texas and Detroit, and, 10 hours a day. And then I would stay behind and I would do more work, and I would study other people, and I was honing my skills. But there comes a point in your career where you have come to a point where you have paid your dues, where you have the skills to now work in a large market, and you are able to get a job in a large market. But then somehow when you do that, you realize what they said was not really true. In Florida, we have the saying that we're permalance. We're permanent workers with freelance pay, and they pay us in sunshine. So if you want to work in Florida, you know what? This is just part of the deal. But why does it have to be part of the deal when I can't figure out how to make ends meet? When I couldn't afford my car. I had to take on a roommate. $210 seems like a lot, but it also means that I have to pay for my own health insurance. And it also means that I have to save for the day that I might be sick, or I might need medical attention, or for the day that I might need to take a week off to go see my sister when she's having a baby, or be able to buy a ticket to fly home to see family. All of these things matter, and they're significant, and they impact our lives economically. They impact our ability to build and create generational wealth. They impact the legacy that we're able to have for our families. This is a big deal, and the impact for me personally, and I'm going to be vulnerable for a minute here, economically, it's been devastating. I've had to move back to my parents' house. And the reality is the emotional and the psychological toll is worse, because trying to figure out how to make sense of a circumstance when I didn't do anything wrong, yet I'm being punished. And the last 23 years of my life's work seems to have just evaporated. And people ask, what can you do? Well, your support means a lot. Speaking out means a lot. Showing up means a lot. And quite frankly, at times I felt like I'm in this fight all by myself.
Last question for you. I say this all the time. Media doesn't always like to cover media. And so now that you're on the other side of the news story, have you been surprised and shocked at how many so-called media reporters have been ignoring your story and ignoring this case going to trial this week?
Yeah, I think I have to say I was shocked and surprised at how many people privately shared their stories with me, but did not want to publicly put their name on the document to join the class action, even though some of these people work still to this day, continue to work 30 hours overtime a week and still are not getting paid. They are afraid of the consequences. They're afraid of being blacklisted. They're afraid of not having a job. They've got families to feed. And I understand that. But the reality is the more we don't speak out, the more this gets perpetuated. And I can't help but draw a parallel from my lived experience in an oppressed society to what I've experienced in this particular case, both of which is all about protecting the patriarchal systemic culture, and both of which essentially perpetuate discrimination, inequality, violence against women and minorities, and economic oppression. So the question is, we have to take a hard look at ourselves, whether you are a viewer, whether you are in the media, whether you are an executive, and we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this?
Trial starts, Thursday in Miami?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Silva, good luck. Certainly keep us abreast of what happens with this case. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?